Hey, everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
The Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Hunt. Bringing you the best GPS mapping software directly to your smartphone or desktop, Onyx offers you the ability to see property boundaries, mark waypoints, track your location, and so much more. Visit onyxmaps.com or you can download it directly from your app store today. Save 20% off of your purchase by using the code NATION20 at checkout. That's capital N Nation followed by the number 20.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet chasing bear. March 28th, Bentonville, Arkansas, we're having the Ozark Black Bear Bonanza. If you're within 12 hours of Northwest Arkansas, you need to get in your vehicle and drive here. March 28th, we're having a bear fat rendering demonstration that starts at 2 o'clock. Bear biologist panel where the bear biologists from Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma will be there answering questions. We're having a live Bear Hunting Magazine podcast, complete with live music and an owl hooting contest. Did you hear what I said? I want the nation's top owl hooters at this thing, and the winner of the owl hooting contest gets a first light package, a sheep hunting of the South first light package. Thirdly, we're having a storytelling event. The event lasts from 2 to 9 p.m. Bentonville, Arkansas. You'll have to go to our social media to get all the details, but you can buy tickets. Hey, check out our buddies at W Hunting Supply. If you're getting any kind of dog-related stuff, hound stuff, Garmin stuff, leashes, collars, anything and everything, check out our buddies at W. Also, with spring coming, check out our buddies at North. I have a lot of buddies. Colby tells me not to say buddies all the time. Check out our friends at Northwoods Bear Products. They're making the best commercial bear scents on the market. And lastly, our buddies at, they are our buddies, Colby. Our buddies at the Western Bear Foundation, hunting conservation organization out west representing bear hunters. You're going to enjoy this podcast with my buddy, Brandon Butler. He's a unique guy. He's got a unique voice inside of conservation. And, if you listen close, I think you'll learn some stuff. I know that I did. We are at Driftwood Acres in Shannon County, Missouri.
That's right.
Yeah. We're from where we're at right now, we're surrounded by a couple 100,000 acres of public land in the Ozarks of East. Are we in southeastern Missouri or south central Missouri?
Kind of right on the dividing line, I would say, towards the eastern side, but right in the heart of the Missouri Ozarks.
Yeah. Man, the creeks, I love the river systems and the watersheds in these Ozarks. They truly are special.
And when I say in the middle of the Missouri Ozarks, people from all over the country will think of Lake of the Ozarks or Branson, which both, of course, are in the Ozarks. But when I say that, I mean like a real wilderness.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in the most remote part of the state of Missouri right now.
Yeah, yeah. Least populated county in Missouri, you said?
No, I don't know if that's true. I heard you say that last night. It's the poorest county.
Okay.
So what it is it's dropped from the third poorest county in the state to the first, unfortunately. And it's the 25th poorest county in America. So we're in competition with a lot of coal country in Appalachia.
Yeah.
So dealing with a lot of poverty issues. And really there's just not an industry going on down here anymore. My friends work in the lead mine, and they turn 18 and they hope to get a job at the lead mine. And my good buddy that works there, I won't name his name because he hates the fact that he's got to take showers multiple times per day and wash the poison off of himself. That's a hard way to make a living.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's such a beautiful part of the world. I mean, as you said, there's over 200,000 acres of public land in this county.
Wow.
We've got the elk restoration going on. We've got the Ozark National Scenic Riverways, which is Current River and Jacks Fork. It's a 85,000 acre national park that courses along 135 miles of river corridor. But in true Missouri fashion, it's a national park that you can hunt.
Right on.
So it's amazing that you can set off in a canoe or in a jet boat or anything and get down the river and pull over on a gravel bar and chase a turkey you hear gobbling up on the ridge.
Yeah.
Or you can set up camp and deer hunt for a few days on the public land. It's really, really special to have those kind of water rights, to be able to go down river and camp where you like. And the other thing that I'm really proud of is the fact that, Missouri has this program called Stream Teams, where citizens band together, and it's kind of like Adopt a Highway, but you adopt a stream or a section of a river. And we did one for Current River 2 years in a row with this youth group that I led called the Conservation Leadership Corps. There wasn't enough trash to make it worth our while. So we had to move to a dirtier river.
What a terrible problem to have.
Wasn't it? It was beautiful to think like people are actually down here taking care of the resource. And it's very well protected, and it's very accessible, and it's truly a national treasure that flies under the radar.
Yeah. Well, you guys are hearing the voice of Brandon Butler. And Brandon is, we're at his cabin down here, and really beautiful place. Brandon would be a pretty hard guy to describe in terms of if you were just trying to say what he does. He does a whole lot of stuff. Brandon, now I originally knew you as an outdoor writer, so you write a lot of articles, write some newspaper columns, written all kind of stuff, all conservation based. You were the executive director of
the Conservation Federation of Missouri.
Yeah, for 5 years.
Yes.
And so anyway, pretty interesting history that you got. And currently you're working for Roeslein
Alternative Energy.
And we're gonna get back to that here in just a little bit. So I don't even want to go into that, but it's a really unique and forward thinking energy group, which I want to hear about.
Yes.
Tell me about your place here. So this is like we talked about Fred Bear's place, Grouse Haven. Mm-hmm. I thought about when I pulled up here, I thought about Aldo Leopold's place up in, I don't remember what he called it, but he had a cabin up somewhere that they restored, and anyway,
he just called it the Shack.
Yeah,
and it's all described in the Shannon County Almanac.
Yeah. But tell me about your place here.
Well, it's a dream come true, really. I always joke that my first cabin was under the stairwell in my parents' basement when I was a boy. I had a camouflage G.I. Joe sleeping bag, and I hammered together a few pieces of wood to make my own gun case, and had my pellet gun and BB gun in there, and my slingshot, and my Outdoor Life magazines, and Field and Stream magazines, and Bow Hunter magazines, and that's where this fire really started. And
Did your dad hunt?
No. My dad was of that Vietnam era. He didn't end up in Vietnam, but he was an MP, garden people that came back. It was a tough role for him, and after that, he'd gone out west with his dad, and it just didn't stick for him. He grew up small game hunting, pheasant and rabbit and things like that. But no, he's an incredible woodworker. I mean, he's responsible for a lot of what you're seeing around this cabin, and I mean, I couldn't have a better dad if I picked one, you know.
Yeah.
And but we just don't share that love of fishing and hunting. But his brother, my Uncle Tom, who I'm getting ready to go down to Florida and Osceola turkey hunt with, you know, he's doing his snowbird thing now. He's got a place at Lake Okeechobee, and both of my grandpas were very instrumental. And I tell the story like one grandpa was very, very family oriented. He was actually my step grandpa, but married to my grandma before I was born. Never knew my biological grandfather on that side, and I think he'd been through a rough divorce, and so had my grandma. And when they found each other, that was it. They were holding on, not letting go, and all of his fishing trips from that point forward, from about 50 years old, were with her, not at all. And then I kind of got put in the mix, and that was beautiful because I got to see like this love, like genuine love between two people that really found a second chance in life with each other. And that the older I get, the more I realize just how powerful that was. But then my dad's dad, he was more like, he owned the family business before my dad did, and he owned it after his dad did. So, you know, he had a lot of responsibility, and he needed that reprieve. And him and his buddies back in the 70s would pile into an RV. And I've got some old, we had some old films made into a DVD, you know, and they just played cowboy. Like they would strap a gun to their hip and drink a case of beer a day and hit the mountains of Wyoming and Colorado and kill mule deer and run jeeps off mountains and whatever they had to do to just.
And they killed some big mule deer,
They killed some giants.
There's probably a
Boone and Crockett.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, he's a stomper. He was 1972 in Meeker, Colorado.
I bet he's 30 inches wide at the widest point there.
I hope I have a grandkid someday that'll accept all my mounts when I die, because that's what happened. You know, he passed on, and nobody wanted them. So I said, "There's no way I'm not taking all of them." You know, so
yeah.
So, anyways, I had the exposure in all these different ways. Like one grandpa showed me how important it is to be with family. The other grandpa showed me how important it is to just get away with your buddies. You know, even for short trips like we've had the last 2 days. You know, it's been beautiful, and so I've had a lot of great influences, and now I try to pass on kind of a collection of that to the youth in my life.
Yeah, and so you got this land right now. You've got 40-something acres down here.
Yeah. So I
built this cabin.
I moved on from my under the stairwell hunting camp to a camper. Me and my cousin Derek bought it in college. It was called Delilah Jones, out of a Grateful Dead song, The Mother of Twins. It was a $500, 16-foot, 1972 Scotty Sportsman. The greatest thing I've ever owned. And we hooked that thing up and drug it all over the country. Took it to Memphis in May, music festival, but it was our deer camp more than anything. And just that like freedom of having a place to stay and sleep. And we're hunting Northwest Indiana. Like we were both at Purdue at the time in West Lafayette, and just the idea of having that camp, and then like the dream just kept building and getting bigger. And when I got to Missouri, I went hardcore into waterfall hunting, and there's a lot that happened between that camper and Missouri. Of course, I lived in Montana for a while. I spent a year in Colorado. And finally ended up settling in Missouri, and I eventually bought into a 200-acre duck marsh with 7 other guys. And it was okay, but there's a lot of work that goes into managing a duck marsh, and some of these guys were retired, and they were expecting you up there on a Thursday to be working on food and habitat, and as much as I wanted to do it, my life just wasn't conducive. So I kind of grew frustrated with that partnership, and lo and behold, Governor Jay Nixon decided at the end of his term that he was going to build this state park down here in Shannon County called Echo Bluff. And it was contentious with some of the locals and some of the county officials that didn't want any more public lands or any more state money dumped into a state park. So I kind of got called in to help build some positive
because of your work with the
just my work with the Conservation Federation. I've got this large platform in this newspaper column. And so I came down and was part of this park early, long before it opened, and saw the construction. And I really appreciated how he said he wasn't here to take over the market. He was here to prime the market. And the first time I stepped into Sinking Creek, which is what flows through Echo Bluff, and, I don't talk about it all that often, but if you find Echo Bluff, you're going to find the creek. And we're up the creek a little ways, and I decided I wanted to be here. This is it. After everything that I considered deer, turkey, public lands, open space, rural, remote, affordable, I got a plat book and a former state representative friend of mine, and we kind of identified some properties, and I picked up the phone and called a guy and talked him into selling me the land. He hadn't been here in 5 years, and it was just fortuitous and worked out. And over about 2 years' time, I cleared some land and tore down an old house, repurposed a lot of the materials, and then constructed what you're sitting in today. And it's a true dream come true. And there's nothing fancy about it. It's just, my friends call it my man castle.
It's pretty fancy, man. I'd call it on the borderline of fancy for a man castle.
Well, there's so many things that I'm proud of. Like the ceiling is the roof from the old cabin that I tore down. Right. So it's the rusted corrugated metal. Yeah. And then much of the interior is done in red cedar.
Yeah.
But those were scraps that come from a stave mill where they're building these like large posts. So they're shaving down to get to that.
And that's very Ozarkian.
Yeah, it looks great.
Eastern red cedar.
So I love it, man, and my kids appreciate it and come down with their friends now, and as they're getting a little older, they're seeing the value of having wilderness to go wander off in and stomp in the creek, and it's wonderful. We've killed some great deer here and had some awesome camps.
I'm impressed with the
turkeys.
Impressed with the deer.
So.
Well, we won't tell people about your deer and turkeys, though.
It's okay. I mean, we're not going to tell them right where they are, but I don't mind dispelling the rumor that there aren't any big deer in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
Because there's some really good deer in the Ozarks, and there's a lot of public land. See, I don't mind saying that because it's important to me that people come here and stimulate this economy.
Yeah.
My friends down here, they struggle to make a living. And I'll tell you one thing, though. If you're willing to work, it's a wide open market. Like the opportunity to work hard and make money down here is there. It's just that, it takes a long time to get established in a culture where you're not from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a beautiful part. It's a beautiful part of the world. The way that I've heard it described, Brandon, and at least in Arkansas, and I think it would be the same in the Missouri Ozarks, is that the Ozarks were culturally and geographically isolated, basically until the road systems in the U.S. improved, and in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the Ozarks in Arkansas, it really was just this pocket of rough mountainous regions that a lot of writers said that. I read something the other day that said it was talking about Ozarkers, and it said isolation is their religion, and I can't. It's a beautiful quote, but it was basically just like these people intentionally didn't want people messing with them, and that's kind of the mentality down here, which can be negative in terms of progression of good things, but in some ways it can be good if you're keeping bad stuff out. But
there's certainly both sides to it, and I see and experience both sides all the time. Like so many Midwesterners, when I was in college at Purdue, I thought that Denver was some kind of holy land.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to move out to Denver and become this mountain man and chase elk and Jeremiah Johnson it up.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much moved out there sight unseen for a job after college. And I got there, and it was a big, smoggy city full of people and congestion. And what kind of drove me nuts about it, and I laugh now and I look back on myself acting the same way I see so many young people acting today, is thinking you knew what you were doing. What's frustrating about that culture, or at least that manufactured culture that's just recently kind of existed out there, is that people act like they want to go out there for this individualism and to do exactly what I said, this mountain lifestyle.
Yeah.
So they all think they're going to be these like reformed mountain people, right, from their Midwestern roots, and they buy the same North Face as everybody else, and they drive the same Subaru as everybody else, and they start talking like everybody else, like you're not happy, you're stoked, nothing's cool, it's rad, and it's just, to me, it all just seems not genuine. And you come down here, and people couldn't be any more genuine. They don't care. Like, they'll just tell you there's this rough individualism and kind of, like you said, the mountains are hard, and it's hard living down here, and it takes hard people to be able to do it. And like the guy, we had a fella come over this morning. What do you think? Maybe 70 years old?
Yeah, I'd say he's probably pushing 70.
And he's going to do the rock on my wall. And we talked. He can't find help. It's like, so these new generations, and it's all over the country, from rich people to poor people.
He was an old-fashioned guy socially. The fact that he came in, he didn't know you, and now you were really hospitable to him. This was old stonemason that we're talking about. Came in this morning to look at some stonework Brandon's doing, and he sat down and talked to us for 45 minutes.
Had coffee.
He was working.
Yeah.
And he wasn't being lazy. He was being polite.
He was being great.
I mean, it wasn't like he was trying to. I mean, he's the boss, so he could do whatever he wanted. But he sat and he told. I mean, he just. It was almost a social obligation to sit down and have coffee with us.
And he got the job. He's gonna get a good job out of it, and I'm gonna get good work out of him, I feel. And it was a fair transaction of time. You know
what? When he was sitting there, I was thinking how familiar I feel with a guy like that. I mean, just in terms of he is the good of this part of the country.
Absolutely.
Hard working. He said he worked with he had two guys that worked with him, but those old stonemasons, man, there's no cheating when you're a stonemason. I mean, everything you get, you work hard for it. He's gathered rock, he sells and gathers rock. I used to actually love to do that. There's something really fulfilling about taking a natural resource straight off the ground and being able to turn that into money. I mean, there's something kind of powerful about that, especially when it's sustainable and something that works. But anyway, I like that old guy.
I like him too. I'm excited to have him. Like, that's what's also so cool about this place is when I sit here and look, I see things that other people don't, because I know who helped me with that or who did this and how that came to be. And now I'll always be able to associate. Really, the last thing to do interior-wise is build this 20-foot wall that goes up to the peak of the vaulted ceilings that the fireplace sits on. And now I'll remember the fact that old man did it, and I'll feel good about it as long as I have this place.
Yeah, yeah. Brandon, what is your passion inside of outdoors and conservation? I mean, like, you've got a rich history. What really makes you tick when it comes to even hunting?
Yeah, I'm a generalist, big time, when it comes to hunting and fishing, and I often say now that I showed up at the Conservation Federation back in 2014 as a hunter and an angler, and those 5 years molded me into a conservationist. I didn't know anything about native grasses or trees or water quality testing or the things that afford me the opportunities to pursue my passions of hunting and fishing. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's whitetail deer and turkeys. I hunt anything. I've killed a couple bears, pheasants, quail, ducks. I'll do it all. Like, there's nothing you can say, let's go do this today. And if it's outdoors, I'll be like, yep, let's go. Yeah. For fishing, I grew up on warm water lakes. There's largemouth bass, crappie, and bluegill. Grew up going with my grandparents to Minnesota and Wisconsin after walleye and yellow perch, which is the best tasting freshwater fish I think you can get is yellow perch.
Yellow perch.
Yeah, it's my absolute. It's like a softer version of walleye. It's just incredibly flaky white meat, and you can only lightly dust it before you fry it. It's the big fishery on Lake Michigan. So I grew up about 10 miles south of the Lake Michigan shore there by Gary, Indiana. I'm from Crown Point, Indiana. And there was a commercial fishery that really hurt that population. And then we had a couple other things happen with invasives. The zebra mussel came in and clarified the water to the point that there's no food sources for the smaller fry and the yellow perch eat. So it's just Lake Michigan's like a petri dish of natives and invasives. The salmon, none of that belongs there, and it's changed dramatically. So I don't get the yellow perch nearly like I did when I was a kid and we'd go out and catch them. But so anything fishing wise, and then I try to go down these paths. I became a full-blown traditional bow hunter for a while.
Yep.
I've backed off that just because of time and the inability to practice as much as I need to. Then I was never going to spin fish again. I was just going to be a hardcore fly fisherman. Now I've kind of backed off that.
I saw you spin fishing yesterday.
I do a lot of it anymore. At this point in my life, I just want to catch fish, and sometimes it's just more conducive to throwing a spinning rod. But if we go up to the Upper Current River and rip streamers for big browns, that's pretty phenomenal. But nothing turns my crank like catching smallmouth on a fly rod in these crystal clear creeks down here.
So that's it, man. Well, we had a good time yesterday fishing. So we were fishing on the Current River with
his name's Billy Smith.
Yeah.
He's a phenomenal guy. You need more people like Billy in your life because he's just genuinely always happy. Like I'm a very fortunate person. I'm rich in so many different ways. And yet I still find days where I just don't want to be talked to or messed with, and I'm grumpy for whatever reason. I've never seen Billy that way. Yeah. And you go get in a boat with this guy, and you just realize, like, how lucky we all are to have these resources and to be outside. He spent 35 years working for the Park Service. So this Ozark National Scenic Riverways is, of course, without contention because it came into existence in the late 50s and early 60s through a lot of use of eminent domain.
Right.
So that caused some horrible sentiment towards the park early on.
Yeah.
And some of those people are still first generation people that are alive and living around here. So even though they got paid, no one stole their land like you hear. Right. They were paid a fair market value for it. And some held out and wouldn't sell. There's some holdings in there.
Are they able to do that with eminent domain?
Yeah, but it can't be transferred. So it's like yours until you die, I guess.
Is that right?
I believe. So there's some holdings in there. And long story short, though, imagine like how you try to impress your father or your grandfather. So if you were raised in this culture of people saying, that park is horrible, they stole our land,
Yeah.
The next generation, you would think it would die down, but I think it can actually be the opposite. I think the animosity grows. And like if grandpa didn't like something, I'm going to not like it even more. And that's a problem for this park down here. So these employees, even the locals, Billy is one of them, for example, who had to balance his love and affection for this park and his job with his life of being a resident of this area and listening to both sides. So he was an incredible ambassador for the parks and still is, and learned the river just intimately. And now he's applying that knowledge to his guide service called Scenic River Guide Service, I believe. And you can find just Scenic River Fishing or Scenic River Guide Service, Billy Smith. But man, like what's interesting is that everybody wants to smallmouth fish when it's 75 and sunny and drink a beer. But in the wintertime, these smallmouth all bunch up in these deep pools. And he's just got them figured out. He knows where they're hiding and he knows what to throw them. And we fished about 2.5 hours and boated, I think, close to 20 fish. And if it wasn't for Hal, we'd only boated probably 10.
Yeah, well, he had Hal was cheating us, man. He was up at the good part of the boat. He was y'all didn't see it, but he was elbowing me out of spots. So
I believe it.
We're talking about Hal Herring here. No, it was awesome yesterday. Beautiful country, absolutely. I'm totally impressed with this part of the Ozarks, and I've never been to this part of the Ozarks. Never been here.
So glad you made it up and. being the bear man that you are, I'm happy to tell you that I've had a couple bears on this piece of dirt.
Yeah.
And get some pictures
Man,
of them.
that's a massive win for conservation to hear that. I mean, it
really
is. People don't. To me, it's so close to home because the bears in southern Missouri, absolutely, and we're not trying to take credit for this. This is just the truth. They came from Arkansas.
Oh yeah, take credit for it. Nobody denies that.
I mean, yeah, but they're moving north into the Ozarks into suitable habitat, and it's here. And there's a breeding population of bears here, and they're projecting sometime in the future potentially a small regulated hunt
in the near future.
Yeah.
So it was pretty amazing. I got to go bear trapping with the Department of Conservation, and they've really upped their bear management and study efforts. And just in the last year, they've determined that they were way off on their count. And when they thought we had roughly 250 to 300 bears, the new number is closer to 500 to 600 bears. And they've always said that we'll start a regulated season around 500 bears. So this year also is very miraculous, is we're going to have our first elk hunt. And I don't know if we've ever had a legal elk hunt in Missouri. I'd have to go back and look. But I know an elk hasn't been shot in the state in over 100 years. More than that, 150 years or something when we extirpated them. So they're back, and they're not far from here, man. Like they're at Peck Ranch, which is just east of Eminence, which is the nearest little town to where we're at.
Okay.
If you look at like the diagram of how the herd is developing their range, it looks like a very distinct teardrop, with the tip of the teardrop being north and the ball of it being to the south. So the herd as a whole is moving south. But there's this spike that goes up into the forest, and it's not 5 miles from where we're sitting.
Does the Missouri population overlap with the Arkansas elk population of the buffalo?
No, we had one cow take off for Arkansas, and they shot her. They don't want to, with CWD and everything that's happening, like the herd is trying to be contained, and with your guys' horrible CWD problem that you've got going on in the Ponca Valley, and we don't want any of that. And we already know that it's going to move up across the, down in like Stone and Taney counties in the southwest corner of Missouri. Like that's one of our new CWD and endemic zones. And it's unfortunate, we could do a whole podcast on chronic wasting disease and how dangerous it truly is. But it's unfortunate that things happened long before we were aware of what was going on. Because, that's conservation too. We're doing things right now, Clay, that we are probably out there promoting and thinking we're like helping. And 50 years from now, we're going to look back on that and say, oh man, like how did we think that was the right thing to do? And
that's the trend of history, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And you're trying to do better, but occasionally you're actually doing harm. And by trailering around cervids, those being deer, elk, moose, any ungulate in the cervid family, CWD was spread, and I blame a lot of it on the captive industry. There's no secret that I've had my battles with those people, but there's also a lot of blame to be placed on the transportation of carcasses by hunters coming back from out west. There is, of course, natural movement from predators moving it, and I mean it's not a disease in the sense like a virus or a bacteria. It's this misfolded prion that is almost impossible to kill and can live in the soil for ever, and so all kinds of problems.
Crazy stuff.
Let's focus on positive stuff.
Yeah. What do you think the key issues of what are the key issues inside of conservation that people should be focused on in this part of the world?
I think the key issue in conservation universally is making people understand the importance of caring. I mean, right now we're so fortunate and lucky to be living in an era of good times. We look back on times and think those were the good old days of this or that. But really, if you look back to the early 1900s, those were not the good old days. Here in Missouri, there was an estimated 400 deer and 2,000 turkeys in 1935.
Wow.
And that's when the Conservation Federation was formed. Citizens rallied together and said, this system that we have is not working. So it's a really phenomenal story in the sense that 75 citizens gathered, and that's a rough number. There's no roster. That's one of the real disappointing pieces of this history, is that there's no roster of who was there. But there was a gentleman named Bill Crawford who lived to be 99 and a half and passed away a couple years ago, and he was 17 at that meeting. So he can tell you about it. And, Starker Leopold was there. Ding Darling, who went on to basically create the duck stamp and founded the National Wildlife Federation. He was FDR's personal friend.
Was he from Missouri?
No, he was from Iowa, Des Moines.
Yeah.
He was from Des Moines, Iowa.
But he was involved with the stuff in Missouri?
He was a leader of it. And while he was at this meeting on September 10th, 1935, he doodled a sketch of a bass coming out of the water and eating a mayfly and a duck coming into land on this pond. And it's amazing. He just drew it. And the original hangs in the executive director's office at CFM.
No way. At
some point, it deserves to be in the Ding Darling National Wildlife Museum, which is down on Sanibel Island in Florida. It's the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge, but there's, of course, a little museum there. Or I don't know if you call it a museum, but some kind of, it's a building with stuff in it. It's related to him.
Building with cool stuff.
And it should be there, I think, eventually. And so there's these legends of conservation. Aldo Leopold was involved. Starker actually came down here and lived for a while and started in on the turkey counts in the 1930s. And they call it the Leopold Cabin. It's on a natural area, Caney Mountain it's called. And I had an opportunity to sleep in there, but chickened out. It hadn't been cleaned in 50 years. And we got there after dark. Me and my buddy Tyler, who's the new director of Conservation Federation, and we got in there, man. We didn't have time to shoot the rats out, so we decided to get a hotel. But there's just rich, crazy, cool history, and things were so bad in the 1930s. And for the last 85 years, not only in Missouri but beyond, we've put so much into restoration efforts that this modern generation, like you and I, we're about 6 months apart in age, so we've been fortunate to never know hardship when it comes to deer and turkey populations.
Right.
And, well, for me, that's not actually true. Turkey, where I grew up in northern Indiana, there were no turkeys when I was a kid. And now they're everywhere. So to actually see a species that I care a lot about brought back and to understand the value of that restoration and what it does not only, economically for these areas where people are coming to turkey hunt, like the Ozarks and like the Ouachitas, people travel to spend money in these impoverished areas. But it's also just the intrinsic value of having a spring season. And that's what turkey's so great. We hunt all fall, and for the first 25 years of my hunting life, it was a half a year thing. And now, I put the deer rifle away and I get the turkey shotgun out, and I love it.
Yeah. I like what you said, that the biggest thing we can do is care. The problem with prosperity is that people become ungrateful and can quickly forget the hardship from which they came. Really, that's the trend inside of society is that, we're the most prosperous nation in the world, and yet our culture is riddled with crisis and ungrateful, unhappy people that don't, it's kind of the same way it can be in conservation. Describe to me what you mean by people caring. To me, what I hear you saying is just people understanding and and that understanding gives just a whole new perspective on what's happening.
Yeah, so a lot of people will talk about that the greatest concern for conservation should be apathy.
Right, yeah.
People sit back and they don't engage because there's so many deer, there's fish in the river. It's good. It's fixed. I can be apathetic about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to add ignorance to that as well. And I mean that in the true definition of ignorance and the fact that people are just not educated about what's happening.
Yeah.
So there are attacks on conservation going on right now in the State House in Missouri that would upset the entire system that we have. This system is so well renowned that it has its own name, the Missouri Model of Conservation, which is really rooted in the fact that our department operates outside of the purview of the legislature, meaning that we have authority vested in a commission that's appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. And really, the commission's not without its flaws, but they allow the science to make the decisions. We have trained biologists making decisions, and the commission ultimately approves. We also have the conservation sales tax, which Arkansas and Minnesota are really the only two states that have kind of replicated. So you guys are reaping the benefits of that as well. So there's dedicated funding. What you were talking about, your sportsman's card and how many species and privileges you get from that.
Yeah.
That's because you have that dedicated funding. If you didn't, those prices would go up significantly.
And what would be the alternative to that type of wildlife management, government control? Because in Arkansas we do the same thing, and we may have got it from Missouri.
You did,
but it's ran by a commission. So tell me what the
your commission can still be overruled by the legislature.
Okay.
So I was Governor Mitch Daniels' constituent services guy in the Indiana Department of Natural Resources in 2008 and 2009. So I worked in the executive office of a state game agency. I answered a lot of hate mail, and concerns about conservation. So it was interesting to see that no matter how many letters came in, there's only like maybe 20 topics. So once I had written my response letters, you knew how to address these issues and concerns and the ridiculousness of them. Now, for example, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources did a study, a social survey, if you will, on whether or not rifles should be allowed in Indiana for deer hunting. When I was growing up, they were not. It was shotguns and muzzleloaders only. So we grew up hunting with side hammer, and this is before inlines too. So we're hunting with side hammer muzzleloaders or smoothbore shotguns. Like the advent of the fully rifled shotgun barrel, it had happened, but not to the point that it had been mass produced. You had to get I remember saving my money to get a Hastings barrel, because that would take my knuckleballs and turn them into fastballs that I'd been throwing at deer. And so forever, that was just the way you deer hunted, right? Well, the NRA made a big push financially to allow rifles in the deer season. Now, there was all the typical stories started flying around. People are going to get killed. Indiana's so flat. It's so populated. And that's the argument in Illinois, southern Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, parts of Ohio, these other states where they don't allow rifles. But this money got injected. And if you get involved in politics and you're around it long enough, you learn the fact that the answer to your question is money. No matter what that question is, just peel a few layers back of that onion and you're going to get to the root cause, and it's money. So money's injected into this, and the Department of Natural Resources surveys citizens. They say they do not want rifles, overwhelmingly. Let's just keep things the way they are, because people are adverse to change to begin with. The legislature overrode that. The legislature had a obligation to the people that were padding their pockets.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
They're getting paid to write legislation in favor of people that are making campaign contributions.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it to you. I'm not going to go all political on you, because you know how deep in the rabbit hole I'll go. But that's just the truth. With enough money, you can influence legislation to override science, whether that be natural science or social science. And that's just one example of how enough money can make the legislature make a decision that's adverse to what the citizens said they wanted.
Yeah.
Now, nothing happened, and I'm glad it happened. It ended up being all right. So it's a bad example if I want to make a case for the fact that they should never be in control. There hasn't been any increase in accidents. I don't know how it's impacted the harvest. That was the other argument. Now you can shoot deer. Everything up there, you're hunting like fence rows and little woodlots, and deer are coming out at 300 yards, and they used to have to get to 100 yards. Now you can pick them off with a 30-06.
Yeah.
300 yards. So that's what's so beautiful about this Missouri model, is that those decisions lie in the hands of scientists. And so we've got it so good, but people are ignorant to the fact that how good they have it. They don't know.
Listen, in Arkansas, that's all we know. And most hunters probably wouldn't even understand how the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission operates. And so they hear a government-appointed commission, which has its issues too. Sometimes you wish there was different things going on in the commission, but it's better. It's way better than a whole bunch of people that probably don't know or don't care about conservation making a decision, I feel like.
my argument against the commission, and I'm not shy to say this, and I'm talking about friends of mine. I know all these commissioners, but they're all rich white millionaires, every one of them.
Yeah, and that's what you hear, and I hear that too.
It's the truth. Like
they're government appointees
who made serious campaign contributions and got these sweet jobs.
Yeah,
they're not paid. It's a volunteer position.
Right. But how long is their term in Missouri?
I think it's 6 years. It's 6 years. Yeah,
they have a 7-year term.
And if you really, and there's a guy on the commission right now that's in his second term. 12 years in charge, and that's 25% of the decision making of a $200 million budget. They're not putting a guy like me or you on that commission, because we're not capable of providing the benefit to get it, and that's unfortunate. I think if I was governor, I would.
But is that better than 75 guys who maybe don't know conservation making decisions?
100%. And it wouldn't be 75 guys.
Or however many's in your
163 state reps and 34 state senators, and almost none of them hunt and fish, like the way we do.
Assuming that your governor is appointing people that at least have some...
They like the outdoors.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it's a prestigious position, and thankfully they kind of let the department do what the department does. And so you look at 1935, there was 400 deer. This year we killed just over 250,000.
That's incredible.
Right? 85 years of restoration efforts. And now we have an estimated population of 1.3 million. In Missouri, we got 6 million residents, and 2 million of them hold a fishing license. That is the state
good.
I want to live in,
That's good.
We've got elk restoration happening. Our bear population is surging. I like the fact that we've restored all the species that belong on our land. Not all, but many of the species that belong on our landscape, whether or not they bring controversy or not. Otters. Tell somebody down here you like an otter, and it's like cussing their mother. It's like, how could you like an otter? Well, have you ever seen one swim? Have you ever heard them chatter with each other?
Now, why wouldn't somebody like an otter?
They eat fish.
Oh, okay.
So it's a selfish thing. Like, instead of looking at ourselves as like part of this continuous evolution of all landscapes and this circle of life that we're in, as just like a, we're an animal that somehow glitched in the matrix and became what we are, and have so much more control of everything else. But, otters belong here. Otters have a role, right? And everything has its place. And that's, I think, where, you look at these hunters and anglers that I grew up with, that I said I was a hunter and angler before I became a conservationist. And I probably could have been sold on that idea too, like kill the otters so there's more smallmouth for me to fish. But now I look at it like that otter has just as much right to that smallmouth as I do, and I want that circle to be complete.
Yeah.
If the otter wasn't there, there'd be a hole in the puzzle.
Yeah.
The picture wouldn't be complete.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at things now. And then I hope people go out and trap otters, and harvest them legally and ethically.
Yeah.
That's just the whole cyclical thing.
Okay, here's the question. Without getting political, why are hunters generally not the first ones banging on the door about environmental issues? And I am without getting political, I was about to say something political. I mean, I'm as conservative as they come in a whole lot of ways, and it just doesn't even make sense. And typically, the conservative people would be the rural people, the hunters, but we're the ones that are in the environment, yet we're the ones that are usually... Can you answer that question without being too political?
I can answer that question very easily. What did I tell you just a few minutes ago?
Ignorance?
No. The answer to your question is?
Aware. I've already forgotten. Engagement, being aware. I've already forgotten. Rewind the tape.
Money.
Okay.
So environmental activism brings regulation that stifles economic growth, historically, which is when we transition this conversation to Roeslein, I'll be able to explain to you why I'm so excited about what we're doing, because it's a market-based solution to dealing with environmental challenges.
Yeah.
So when you talk to a farmer or a landowner about the Clean Water Act and what that means for their operations and the potential fines and recourse that they can have for something happening off of their land into our waterways, they're scared to death. And it's the same thing with a guy that's in construction. He runs into a small wetland, and now construction is halted. Now, you and I and many of the people listening probably want that wetland to be conserved, but at the same time, now you're stopping a project from moving forward. So air pollution, with the fact that we run on fossil fuel in this country, and people are adverse to change. So coal has worked for a long time, but it doesn't really work anymore. Both candidates in the last election were trying to go around coal country talking about how they were going to bring it back, and the president made a big point of that. Coal's not coming back. It's just not, New coal plants aren't being built. My friends that all work in utility divisions are looking for renewable sources of energy. It's just the direction that we're going, and people drag their feet on change. And because it's what we know, it's what pays the bills at home. So it all comes back to your economic security. And
That makes sense.
I got one of my best friends, a guy named Charlie. We had this conversation about climate change, which I'm seriously concerned about. And there's no denying it's not happening. 80% of people in America believe it's happening now. I was just a guest of Congressman Billy Long, who is the congressman from Springfield, Missouri, staunch Republican, former auctioneer, friend of Johnny Morris at Bass Pro Shop. And he's on the House Energy Committee. And he asked me to come up and make a presentation to members of Congress on this committee at kind of a showcase that they were having in the Rayburn building of the United States Capitol. And it was great. I took my daughter, and it was like a couple days in Washington with her, but it was all Republicans talking about how they want to address climate change now in a market-based approach, meaning that there's ways that we can do this without stifling economic growth.
Yeah.
So I'm not being political. I'm just being factual in saying that the Republican Party is the party that has really held up, the changes. And that's because their people typically are the rural people that are mostly afraid of those economic hardships that come with that shift, or at least that time of shifting.
Yeah.
And now they can't deny climate change anymore. Just from a pure political stance of like, okay, our constituents, our voting bloc believes in climate change. 80% of Americans now have been proven to believe in it. What's our new narrative going to be? And the new narrative of the Republican Party is the narrative that I've been running with all along, which I feel like I'm a man without a party, often. I just, like, I vote a split ticket. I'm researching my candidates. I'm trying to figure out who's best for my interests. And I think that's what everybody should do. What's best for your interest? And my interests are my economic security, the health and wellness of my family and those close to me, and really all citizens of this state and country. And then conservation in the outdoors, like who's good on those issues. But it's great to see that we're aligned now, right? We're aligned on the fact that the problem exists, both parties. And that's the course you want to take to solving any major problem, is first accepting the fact that there is a problem. So it's taken us a long time to get over that hurdle, but we're there. And now, as a country and a society, and ultimately as a globe, as a global economic society, like, we got to work together to come up with solutions, but we got to put people to work while we're doing that. And we can't just go shut down a coal mine or go shut down a coal plant today.
Yeah.
It's got to be a process. And that's why you're seeing all these regulations come in that greenhouse gases are going to be reduced by 25% by 2030 or 50% by 2050. And it seems like a long time to those of us that are sitting here thinking in 2050, I'm going to be 70.
Yeah.
But in 2050, babies are going to be born that are going to live for 100 years too. So
yeah. It's a shame that the political process and the temperature of this country is so polarized, because to talk about environmental issues, there's people right now that are probably thinking, this is left-wing stuff. And it's really pretty bizarre. Or to think that because you care about environmental issues, you want to get rid of guns. I mean, it's almost like the two, the polarization comes with like all this different stuff. And that's what's bizarre. And that's what's, that's what's a shame, is that, to talk about caring about the environment means that, you're one direction real far or the other. And it's just kind of bizarre because as hunters, man, I want that stream to be clean. I also am not a tree-hugging hippie that's crazy that doesn't understand reality. And I'm not enticing. What I want to do is set you up to talk about what you do, Brandon. And, that's all I'll say about that. I mean, we really do have to not be too polarized. I mean, that's the temperature of the country is polarization, either side. And we've, especially as conservationists and hunters, I mean, yeah, our rights to keep and bear arms are so critical and powerful, and we got to do anything to save that. Also, our right to have brownie bass down this stream because it's not being, polluted is equally as important.
So I love confusing people. I do it all the time. So as the executive director of CFM, I was essentially the chief lobbyist for conservation in the state of Missouri. So I was in the Capitol working with legislators, but I was also very much out front in public interface, going around the state giving conservation talks. The first thing that I think people aren't aware of is that conservation and environmentalism are not symbiotic. It's not the exact same thing. A lot of the environmentalists, those in, say, like the Sierra Club or some of these very well-established left-wing type of environmental organizations, they're important. They're doing good work. They're pushing us in one direction. And then you've got the complete opposite of them, the anarchists that want no regulation, and they're pulling us in a different direction. But conservation, the very simple definition of conservation is the wise use of our resources, right? So like when I bought this property, I hired a forester to come in here and mark the trees for me to do a select cut. Some people would think you're going to buy this beautiful forested property and cut the trees down. Well, some of those trees are ready to be harvested. Those trees are a renewable resource that have value economically that allows me to have this property. So I did a timber harvest, and I took about 25% of what I spent on this property back in, and that allowed me the down payment to build the cabin, right?
Yeah.
So it's the
utilitarian conservation.
It's the wise use of our resources, using our natural resources in a sustainable way to make sure that we perpetuate them into the future, but also reap the rewards of them today. So I'll go in and talk, and it could be like I'll do a talk to any size of group from 500 people to 10. And it could be, 75-year-old cat ladies, or it could be, a group of bulldoze driving, beer drinking, deer hunting men. And it'll surprise the cat ladies that I own probably 50 firearms. They think I'm great until they find out that I hunt. And I'm a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment and a big-time firearm enthusiast, right? And then I'll go talk to the bulldoze driving, beer drinking guys. We'll just start talking about all these different calibers, and they're like, this guy's not bad. And then I'll bring up the Clean Water Act and the fact that I want there to be regulations on water. And then it's like, damn it, he tricked us.
Yeah.
It's like people can't understand that you can have both. Yeah. And I'll tie the creek even closer to home, like not just the fact that we got smallmouth in there to go down and catch, but like I run that water through my cabin is for the shower and the toilet, and like you asked me this morning, like, can I brush my teeth with that? Yeah. Like, what a shame that we have to have that concern that our water is too polluted to brush your teeth with. But you asked me if I've ever gotten the beaver fever. Yeah. So far, no. Like it's coming out of a spring creek that bubbles up in the holler back about a mile and a half. There's no livestock between me and the spring. The headwaters. Yeah. So I take my chance. We don't drink it like we drink Culligan water or bottles of water, but we certainly use it for the shower and the toilet and the sinks and stuff like that. Wash the dishes with it. And I just love the fact that I feel confident in that water is clean enough to do that with. But I also hate the fact that most water is not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me, so, this whole idea that money and economic stability is often the thing that makes people afraid of environmental stuff, which makes total sense. Tell me what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so I'm just beyond thrilled with the new role that I have and the man that I'm working for. I'm the director of communications for a company called Roeslein Alternative Energy, and Rudy Roeslein is our founder. I met Rudy through the Conservation Federation. A good story, in fact. There's a man named Frank Oberle, and Frank is just he's just a unicorn, and so is Rudy. And when those two types of people meet, magic can happen. And Frank, he was a machine gunner on the side of a helicopter in Vietnam, which was the most deadly job you could have over there, the highest casualty rate. And we, of course, did not treat our soldiers well when they came back from Vietnam. It wasn't, we still need to do so much more today for our military veterans. But I do believe, and I think most would concur, that they have it better than the guys coming back from Vietnam did. And Frank obviously had PTSD and issues that he dealt with, and he found his solace in nature. He became a world-renowned photographer. He was on staff at Life magazine, at the peak of Life magazine. He was selling images to ad agencies in New York. Like, he was a photographer for the Mad Men era. And eventually he burned out on the photography and took some of his money and bought a little over 500 acres of basically destroyed land in north central Missouri outside of Kirksville. And he restored it all to native prairie. And then he started a seed collection company called Pure Air Natives. And he became kind of this like godfather of native prairie, tallgrass prairie restoration. Well, somehow his path intercrossed with Rudy Roeslein. I believe it was at the Missouri Prairie Foundation. And Rudy was already a very successful businessman. He was an immigrant to America when he was 7 years old. His family was displaced after World War II and was sponsored by a family to come to St. Louis. And Rudy's just one of those mentally and physically tough human beings that refuses to fail. And he worked his way up through high school and athletics, and he was the captain of the 1967 St. Louis University National Championship soccer team. He's just one of those guys that's successful his whole life because he works harder than anybody else, and he outthinks everybody else. And he created a company eventually called Roeslein and Associates, which today is the world's leader in the manufacturing or in the construction of manufacturing plants that make aluminum beverage cans. So he says wherever you are in the world, on planet Earth, if you drink out of an aluminum beverage can, that there's an 85% chance it came off of an assembly line that Roeslein and Associates built.
Wow.
So they've done 250 of these in over 50 countries, and he's world traveled. I mean, for 30 years, he was all over the world doing this. But again, his solace is found in nature, and he acquired this large farm up in northern Missouri, right by the Iowa border, and went to work on restoring it. And he does everything in this like engineered process in his mind. Like, that's where he's made his money, is being able to see how like a system can bring things together mechanically, but he also understands it naturally. For example, he developed an assembly line that, like, if you remember the beginning of, for all of those our age and older, if you can remember when Laverne and Shirley was a show and it would open and there's like a bottle line and it's going like single file.
Yeah.
Rudy figured out how to spread that out wider. And he said, one day I was just thinking about when a river flows downstream and it comes to a boulder, the river doesn't shut down. The river finds a way to work around that obstacle and then merge back behind it. And he took that natural system and converted it to a mechanical process and created a new way of running an assembly line for when one line goes down, the rest of them will flow around it. So genius stuff that's rooted in his appreciation and understanding of nature. So then moving forward, he wants to do something to address the issues that we have environmentally in this country and in this world. And anaerobic digestion, which is a natural process that happens when oxygen is removed from the equation, is big in Europe. And Rudy's so well-traveled in Europe, he knows that this is something going on over there that should be being applied here. So he creates Roeslein Alternative Energy between two visions. One is Horizon 1, which is the anaerobic digestion of livestock manure to create renewable natural gas. And Horizon 2 is the anaerobic digestion of native prairie plants to create renewable natural gas. Horizon 1 is operating now. That's what we're in the middle of finishing off these large-scale farms, CAFOs. So anybody familiar in your neck of the woods with what's gone on in the buffalo? And these are very environmentally contentious.
What is a CAFO? I don't know.
It's a confined animal feeding operation.
Okay, gotcha.
So any of these confined animal feeding operations with more than 1,000 animal units. And there's environmental bans coming in on these. So it's like, okay, we have a horrible problem that we have to solve. We have an exploding population in this world.
That we've got to feed.
That we got to feed. But we've also got to take care of our planet sustainably. How do we do that? So these CAFOs aren't going away. No matter what health ordinance you put in, not everybody's going to grow chickens in their backyard and garden. Like we got a lot of people to feed, 9.5 billion on this planet. So how do we do it in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way? So what we've done is we've gone in and we've tarped over these lagoons, and about 8,000 hogs are defecating and urinating into a single lagoon. So these hogs, like if you're picturing the kind of hog farm that I would have pictured growing up, you're thinking of pigs rolling around in the slop and mud. Not the case at all. They're living on graded floors in air-conditioned and heated barns, and they're defecating and urinating through these slots that then goes into a trough and is flushed with water out into this lagoon. Historically, or still what's going on now in many instances, is that breaks down and the gases are emitted into the atmosphere. So a significant portion, like 27% estimated, of methane entering into our climate, which is significantly worse than CO2, is coming from livestock waste. Mm-hmm. We tarp over these giant lagoons.
And methane is what we can burn as clean energy.
Exactly. So what we do is we go in and we tarp over these lagoons, and anaerobic digestion, again, is a natural process of bacteria breaking down these solids, and it only happens when the water temperature is 60 degrees or higher. So our window is really like April through October for the natural process without heating it, and which we don't at this point. But those tarps will blow up like giant blimps, and then we suck that gas off. And for example, one farm might have 10 lagoons, and each one of those blows up, and each one of those has a compressor system that sucks that gas out from underneath that tarp to a centralized gas purification skid. We clean that gas right there. We flare off the undesirables, the CO2, and then we capture that methane in a pure renewable natural gas form. And it's directly injected into the natural gas grid in North Missouri. Wow. So we've built.
Now where does that natural gas have to be processed more before it can be used at your stove at your house?
No, it's going in and mixing right now with. It's the same chemical compound.
That's crazy, man.
It's incredible, and it's very lucrative at the moment because of some carbon credit opportunities in California in their low carbon fuel standard. So California has really led the way. Minnesota, New York, Colorado, some of the more progressive states are following suit. But man, what's so beautiful about this is it's very agriculture and very rural community oriented, and that's where the Republican Party is seeing an opportunity to really advance this. Mm-hmm. So Horizon 1 is happening.
We can't talk about California being progressive unless we dog them and slap them for their unprogressive stance on hunting large carnivores. But go ahead.
Yeah, they're surely not without their problems, right? But they got some incredible duck hunting up in the Sacramento Valley that I'm going to get into. But long story short, they have what they call the low carbon fuel standard, which values your gas based on your carbon intensity score. So that is factored by how much carbon you're producing in the production, transportation, and usage of your renewable fuel that's used in transportation. See, out there, they're running trucks on CNG. You can go compress natural gas. You can go to a gas station and fill up on compressed natural gas. UPS has converted like almost 200,000 of their fleet vehicles in California to run on CNG. So they value your gas on this carbon intensity score. For example, ethanol, which is another biogas, another form of renewable energy, it values at about plus 80. We shattered the ceiling and the market, coming in at negative 372. We have produced
So it's really high quality, clean natural gas.
Yeah.
Coming from these solar farms.
We don't use hardly any fossil fuels in the production or transportation of it.
I see what you're saying.
So we have a negative carbon impact on the environment. And it's direct injected into the grid, and California values it based on an offset of fossil fuel usage.
Yeah.
So that's Horizon 1, and it's happening. Like, we're profitable on that. We produced 160,000 decatherms of renewable fuel last year. Horizon 2 is what the whole vision is about. So in North Missouri and a lot of the heartland, agriculture has pushed into marginal lands. When people talk about, like, why don't we have quail? It's because farms have gotten to the point of farming as many acres and as many square inches of their landscape as they can. And who can blame them, right? Like, that's their livelihood. These are farmers just trying to make a living. And we look at, like, the economic reports on agriculture in this country, and it's not easy to be a small farmer these days at all, right? So what we found is that instead of looking for alternative solutions, they just keep putting input costs like seed and tractors into these marginal lands. And then there's multiple reasons. One, they don't know what else to do. Two, crop insurance will let a marginal crop get failed, and you can still get a return on it. So that's not a good thing for anybody. It's, taxpayer funded. And we come in now with an alternative solution that is similar to the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP. CRP at its peak had 40 million acres enrolled, and now it's...
And CRP, I want to let you talk, and then I want to say it real simply, because you did it yesterday, and I think I understand in a real simplistic way. But let me stop you right there. CRP is when the government is paying farmers not to farm sections of agricultural land.
Exactly. So it's you're putting land that has previously been farmed into a reserve program and letting, habitat-friendly grasses and plants and shrubs come back. And it's supposed to be for creating a conservation reserve for wildlife and animals. What it really exists for is to set commodity prices on agricultural products. Like, we can't overproduce, otherwise the prices drop. It's a supply and demand. It's a very simplistic supply and demand.
It's designed to help farmers be financially stable, because is that right?
By managing the cost and value of their crops.
Right.
Like, if me and you just overproduced corn to the point where we had more to sell than there were buyers for, then our value of our corn would be dramatically reduced.
And so all the work we did for the whole year would be worth nothing, and we'd go bankrupt after the course of a few years.
So the problems with agriculture doing this is the fact that they're farming hillsides. Like, imagine like some Inca village in South America that you've seen old drawings of, where they stair step a hill. And in Missouri, we're doing it. It's called terracing. And what that causes is horrible runoff. So everything runs downstream. We're back to water quality, and the fact that, like, the Gulf of Mexico is dying. Again, science, right? This isn't a debate.
200 square mile dead space.
Exactly. And that's because of
probably bigger than that now.
That's because of all the nitrogen and phosphorus that's coming off agricultural lands from every river and drainage in the Midwest.
Yes.
And it's all ending up at the mouth of the Mississippi River, and it's eliminating a multi-billion-dollar economy down there around commercial fishing and recreation. So it's our fault for sending it downstream. But again, we got to have agriculture. So what do? Well, we institute nature's native sponge, which is prairie. So we bring back tall grass prairie, and we plant along waterways and in marginal lands. The root systems of native grasses and plants will go 10 to 15 feet deep in the soil. They absorb a lot of water, and then they'll block. Imagine it's like a defense for our water systems. So these hillsides are farmed, but we're trying to take those farmed hillsides and put them back into prairie, and then farm your prime acres, those profitable acres that are actually generating money for you above and beyond your input costs. And then we will enter into a long-term contract like CRP, like a 10-year contract with you to restore the prairie and then harvest it and feed it into above-ground anaerobic digesters and make renewable natural gas out of that as well. So we're going to be able to take farmers and landowners from just being into agriculture to also being into renewable energy production, and then getting them into the carbon credit and water quality credit markets as well. So you can go from being a corn and soybean farmer to being a corn and soybean farmer, a renewable energy producer, and a accredited, basically.
Let me describe to you what I'm hearing you say, and then you tell me if it's right. So I'm a farmer in Missouri or wherever. This is a national company, so it could be anywhere. But I'm a farmer in North Missouri. I'm farming 1,500 acres. 900 acres of that 1,500 is prime farmland. It's flat. Everything is right about it being profitable for growing agricultural crops. 600 acres of that is marginal farmland that I plant every year or put in CRP at different times. And like you said, the insurance type stuff, like some farmers would plant stuff almost knowing that it was going to fail to collect insurance. That can happen. I mean, and maybe that's not the right way to say that. That's a bad way to say that.
It can happen.
Yeah. And I'm okay. So you just told me I was wrong there, Brandon. That's okay. But what you guys are saying is that you'll take the marginal lands and pay the farmer to restore it back to native prairie.
Yeah, we're not at the point yet to where I can say how much we can pay per acre. We're working with Iowa State to come up with the right mix that provides the most fuel for energy production, along with the most wildlife and ecological. So our VIN at Roeslein is 3-tiered: energy production, ecological services, and wildlife benefits. So what's the best mix of these natives that'll give us energy production, protect our landscape and protect our water, and provide critical habitat for wildlife? It's a symbiotic relationship with all these things working together.
And then you're going to harvest the native prairie grass, cut it, hay it, put it into, and you guys have the science and the ways to do this, but anaerobic digestion, like basically letting this grass rot, and the gases, methane gas from that is being captured.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's pretty simple, and it makes sense. It's much more complex than that in terms of how that's going to make money, how it's good for the farmer, how it's good for the land. But the idea is simple. You know, my degree's in environmental soil and water science. And man, what is so powerful that really not a lot of people understand is just the value of soil, value of water quality and soil. And, when I was in college in the early 2000s, University of Arkansas, when I learned about the 220 years ago, it was a 200 square mile dead space where nothing lives, where the Mississippi River runs into the Gulf of Mexico. That blew my mind. And it's all coming from, the Mississippi River drains this huge section of the U.S. We're the breadbasket of the world. We have all this tillable acres, and basically inputs of nitrogen, phosphorus, and fertilizer goes onto all this land. Excess nutrients gets into the river, and then that flows down, and excess nutrients and water basically causes algal blooms and sucks up all the oxygen. And long story short, this is it's a very dynamic process when we're talking about water quality. But the idea of putting it back in native prairie is powerful, and sounds good to me, man.
Well, if you look at the recent trends of flooding, we have had 100-year floods every year. So things have changed, and there's multiple reasons why. Climate change is part of it, but we've also degraded our soil and compacted our landscape, meaning that the traditional means of farming is plow and tillage, and then that compacts the soil down. So we've drained our soil of the resources it needs, the minerals and the nutrients, by just taking and taking and taking. I don't know how many people ever read that book when we were kids called The Giving Tree, but it's like you can only take for so long until there's nothing left to take from. So we have to regenerate soil. We have to put nutrients back into it. Cover crops are a big part of that. But then cover crops could be viewed as simply an input cost by farmers trying to stimulate the quality of their soil. Cover crops are a big part of our component too. So really we'll be collecting renewable natural gas from livestock manure, from digesting native prairie plants, and then also digesting cover crops. So instead of leaving that field barren throughout the winter, and you've walked out on a hard row crop field, it's like concrete. And then we get these torrential rains, and it's like raining on a parking lot. And then that rushes off into the river, and then it all comes downstream. And here in Missouri, where the Mississippi and the Missouri come together, we're at the end of that, Missouri River drainage, and we're getting flooded out every year because there's nothing left on the landscape to absorb this large amount of water that's coming down. And when that water rushes all the way down from North Dakota, South Dakota, through Nebraska, wherever, it's coming all the way, it's bringing with it all the bad stuff that's rushing off of those fields. Like you said, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the pesticides, the insecticides. Yeah. So by instituting this renewable natural gas, or by instituting this native prairie buffer zone, we'll be able to stop a lot of that from happening, but we'll also make it a market-based approach by generating a profit off of turning it into renewable natural gas.
And that's what's pretty cool about this this is all private sector stuff.
It's all market-based. We are a market-based solution.
It's got to make money.
It's got to make money or it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that's good.
It's capitalism.
Yeah.
I'm a capitalist. I believe in that system, and I'm proud to be part of a system that I know is bringing great value to our landscape and to the people that live there, as well as making money. And that's another thing that we're super proud of is we've got about 20 young men right now, and I'd like to say young men and women, but none of the young women in the area have signed up to slosh around in pig shit yet. So not that the guys do either, but they're on top of the tarps and stuff. But we've got a crew of young men that are educated and good workers that are now able to live on their family farm or in these very rural North Missouri communities. Because we're down here in the Ozarks and we talk about the economic depression. You and I have talked at length about it. That's going on in ag lands all across this country too. Yeah. You get up, it ain't like people are rolling in it up in North Missouri. You get up to Unionville, Green City, Greencastle, these little dots on the map. They're struggling just like we are down here. And we're bringing jobs to that region.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. This is an endeavor that's really never been done here, at least. Like, how far along are you guys in the process to where you could know that this was going to work or not?
We're past the point of whether or not it'll work.
Okay.
Yeah, the Renewable Natural Gas Coalition, of which we're a leadership member. You'll edit all the coughs and stuff out, right?
Yeah, sure. I'm writing down one.
The Renewable Natural Gas Coalition, of which we're a leadership member, 5 years ago had a meeting with 60 people there. The meeting we just had in December of 2019 had over 550. Every major oil and gas corporation was represented. I now have friends and colleagues at BP, Marathon. They're all looking for the sources that they need to meet their goals of 10 to 15% renewable by 2030.
Okay.
Or whatever that goal may be.
So there's a demand for what's happening
There's
here.
demand for what's happening. We are at the tip of the spear.
What about the financial side of it? I know the science would work. Everything that, and obviously I'm just hearing the surface of it. But replanting prairies and native grass, paying farmers for that through long-term contracts. That all sounds like good stuff. What about the financial side of it, Brandon? Is that what is yet to be known if it's going to work?
Well, currently it works because there is credit coming from government programs. That's the scary thing, right? We are reliant on these credits. For example, when Volkswagen had that debacle with emissions and they weren't exactly truthful and they paid a big fine, a lot of that money went into an endowment that now pays for this renewable fuel. So our gas is significantly more valuable than an equal amount of fracked natural gas.
Okay.
But at what point do we invest in the future of our planet? Like, at what point do we say we can produce this renewable energy, but at the same time we can do good things ecologically? So it's an investment at this point through funds that will hopefully move it into a more mainstream, a more universally done process.
Yeah.
So that is the concern, like that, and then we're open about that. We're not hiding the fact that we're right now reliant on this California market, but Minnesota's coming soon, we expect. And I was just on the floor of the New York State Assembly, meeting only with Republicans, and they're excited about this. They want me to come back to their district and talk to farmers about it. Now, I think big. I struggle with details, which is why I'm here telling you about it while the really smart people are back at the office figuring out how to make it happen. But I can see this scaling down to the individual household. We're right now digesting livestock manure into renewable natural gas that's going into the grid that's coming back to homes. Why don't we install digesters on the home to where when you use the restroom, it goes into that. When you dump your food scraps down, it goes into that. Any organic material that you have, like cardboard or paper plates, goes into that. And it digests and creates power to heat your own home. Like, we're not close yet to using all of our opportunities and resources. Yeah. But I expect that we're going to get there. We have to.
Yeah. Well, when we look at the challenges that conservation has faced in 2020, I just read a book by Valerius Geist and Shane Mahoney, North American Wildlife Conservation. And a big theme inside the book is that what has worked for the last 100 years in conservation is going to have to morph and change for it to work now. And it was kind of a surprise to me to hear that, because we've had so much success restoring big game and saving wildlife and saving wild places over the last 100 years. We feel pretty good about ourselves. The new narrative inside of conservation is going to have to be environmental issues closer to home, and that historically has not been our narrative. And anyway, I just see kind of like, why are we talking about this on the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast?
Because we want bears to propagate into the future, and for that to happen, they have to have healthy habitat.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, I'm a Southerner and come from just to be frank, and nobody would be surprised with this, I mean, a very conservative political background. And I know that people hear anything about environmentalism and they think, oh, geez, left-wing, crazy liberals coming to take my guns. And that mentality we just can't have.
No.
I mean, to me, that's one of the challenges that we're going to have to adapt into our repertoire of thinking inside of this new era of conservation, is that we got to be the ones that are saying, yeah, we want our waters clean, we want our soils and agriculture, we want it sustainable, we want farmers to make a living, we want families to be able to keep their farms. We want to find ways, like what I'm hearing you guys talk about, of making agriculture better. And I mean, you're doing it on both sides. You're doing it on the crop agriculture side and on the meat production side, which is pretty amazing.
Well, politics are so hard to come to understand. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which is essentially a suburb of South Chicago, and everybody knows about the Chicago Democratic machine. And my great-grandfather started a floor covering company that my grandfather owned and my dad and his brother owned. And it turned into a very large-scale commercial floor covering company, but it was union. And unions typically vote Democratic. So I grew up in this Democratic environment where everybody around me voted Democrats. And these aren't what you would think in today, the way Democrats are painted as these liberal, blue-haired people driving Subarus. These are construction workers crawling around on their knees, kicking in carpet, working their asses off. And I mean, that's how I was raised. And then I get out to Montana and it's hunting and fishing and conservative values and living rural. And I became part of the Young Republicans. My family's like, what happened to you? And then I started seeing, things from both sides of the fence. And like a pendulum, I feel like I've kind of swung both ways and settled right in the middle. but I pay attention a lot more than the average person. And most people just seem to assimilate to a party because there's one or two very important issues to them personally, and one party is better for that one specific issue than the other party. I don't know what the answer is, Clay. I know that the polarization is worse now than it's ever been in my life. We're not that old, but there's obviously been times like the 1860s where it was pretty bad. So hopefully before it continues to get worse, we can start finding solutions to make it better. And that's what I love so much about what I'm doing at Roeslein. It's because if I'm talking to a conservative, we are working on agriculture and agriculture economies, which are typically rural, and we're trying to find jobs, or we're trying to find people to fill jobs in rural communities, and we care about all that stuff deeply. We also care very much about our environment and the landscape and our water quality and the wildlife and fish that call those places home. And the Democrats are eating that up. So we can bring these people to the table and we can say, we're serving your constituent needs and desires, and we're serving your constituent needs and desires, and we're doing it through a market-based solution that people profit from. And now every industry needs to start looking for those kind of opportunities because they're out there. And we at Roeslein are very fortunate that we work for a man that had not only the vision, but also the economic ability, the money, in layman's terms, to pursue this. And thankfully, I knew I wanted to go to work for Rudy Roeslein when we were talking one day, and he said, I have enough money to buy any ranch in America. I could go be Ted Turner's neighbor and rock the rest of my years away staring at a herd of elk grazing out in my meadow. But what good would that do the world? What good would it do for me to take all this knowledge I've accumulated and bottle it up and not put it to use to make this planet better for my grandchildren and their grandchildren? And that's when I said, sign me up, Coach. I'm in.
Yeah. Well, interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. Really is.
But it's all rooted in hunting and fishing for me.
Yeah.
That's where this little snowball started rolling down the mountain.
Exactly.
And I've had jobs that I had no passion for. I had jobs that were just paying the bills. I had to make a real hard decision with a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, and my wife was staying home with them at the time. I walked away from a 6-figure job to take a $40,000 job. Wasn't a good conversation with my dad. My irresponsibility, but I had this vision for what I could do in the space that I care about. And I just want to make sure that anybody out there listening, Clay and I are doing this outdoor media stuff that I grew up watching. Never dreamed I could do it. Nobody ever told me. Nobody ever encouraged me. No one said you could be one of these writers that you read, or you could be on TV, or like Clay, make a video that 3 million people have watched. So whatever it is that you're passionate about, you can do it. You really can. And if that's outdoor communication or building a rocket ship, I just want you to hear in a broad sense that you can do it. I'm encouraging you to chase that passion and make the world a better place.
Yep. Awesome, Brandon. Well, thanks for having me up here. Thanks for showing me this part of the Ozarks.
I'm so glad you made it. I've wanted to have you up here for a long time. I was a fan of yours before I was fortunate enough to become a friend. Open door policy, man. You are welcome here. I really hope you'll come back in the summer and bring your family. Do some swimming in the creek and some floating on the river. And I'll come down and see you in Fayetteville, too. That's a beautiful part of the country that you live in.
Yep. You got to see the global headquarters. Bear Hunting Magazine. Well, hey, all this stuff we're doing, I think, is for this reason, because we want to keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears live.
Thanks.
And other critters.
And thank you so much for the bear grease. Fried crappie in bear grease.
That's right.
My new favorite.
Yeah, man. Right on. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Clay.
Hey, everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.